I'm sure many of you have busy full-time jobs like I do, so time in the garden is limited, precious, and need to be used wisely. So today in this video, I'm going to show you how I keep up with my garden with a busy life and just to avoid any type of overwhelm. So let's get started. I'm Steffi, I'm a home gardener here in Attleboro, Massachusetts, is on 6, and I love to take you along for the ride here. So welcome to my channel. My first advice to you is to think about what are your priorities for your garden. They might be different from what I prioritize in my garden, but what I can recommend is to sit down and think about what are your 5 top priorities or top garden goals for this year, because when everything goes bonkers and life is just going on, those are things which you can revert to and rely on to just come back and help you focus in moments of overwhelm when things are going on. So for example, I always sit down in the beginning of the year when the garden is still sleeping, sometime in January or February, when I start my new garden journal, and think about what are my 5 key priorities. For me this year, the 5 ones I have defined are simplicity, staking, only growing what we eat, taking more pictures, and share more flowers. So when I keep those 5 items in mind, especially number 1 and number 2, those drive a lot of things of what I'm doing right now. I have a super busy life. I travel a lot for business, so I got to trust that it's fully thriving while I'm gone without having my family here jumping to the rescue for certain things. So I'm really leaning into simplicity just to enjoy the garden more and also have time to enjoy it and not just doing little things for maintenance. So when we think of simplicity, what do I mean by it? So for example, I don't do anything anymore when I see an aphid or so. Haven't done anything about that last year and it went fine in most cases. So I think about pest control. What are those bugs which maybe just do some cosmetic damage? I don't do anything for those anymore because this garden here is only for my private entertainment, which means I'm not dependent on having picture perfect dahlia foliage or filler foliage for my bouquets or anything. So this is truly not that important. So I'm not fretting the small bug stuff and the small stuff which goes on leaves or my slug damage here on almost all my dahlias. As long as it's not threatening the plant itself and its survival, I'm not doing anything. So that's my simplicity when it comes to pest control this year. I will still fight the squash bugs, and I also will fight still the tomato hornworms, just because they can damage a tomato plant or a squash plant so quickly and so hard, and those problems multiply too quickly, at least for the squash bugs. Yeah, I don't want them to throw a big fat family fest in my garden. It's already enough that I have a big groundhog family next door. We don't need to add more to the party here. So those few things are still the ones where I focus on, and I'll make sure that they don't get out of hand. But anything small, anything with just does cosmetic damage, don't care. Right? So those things, to define those things for you, are really, really important. So when we talk pruning, for example, I only prune, for example, my indeterminate tomatoes, because pruning helps them to just focus more energy on the fruit, so it gets bigger fruits, but also helps with airflow, which is disease prevention. So that's something what's important to me. Again, I want to make sure that the plants I have in my garden thrive, and that is where I'm focusing on. When it comes to my cut flowers, there I'm also focusing on keeping things to keep production going, because that's the purpose of it. I want to grow more flowers. That was topic number 5, or priority number 5, to share more flowers with the world, right? So for that reason, I want to be successful with my flowers, and deadheading or cutting them hard back to keep the production going, that is something what's important. Let's do the pruning maintenance together, and I'll show you what I do. It really doesn't take long, so we can do that together. But one little thing, it doesn't matter how small my pruning job is and how few plants I prune. Something that's really important to me is, and what I hold as a standard here in my garden, no matter how busy I am, is good sanitation practices. So I always put some bleach solution and some Dawn solution with me to really clean my shears between each plant. Yes, each plant when I'm snipping things off. This just is one thing which is super important, because the human is the biggest disease factor in the garden, and I really don't want to be the reason that my plants suffer. So that's the one thing I'm really keeping up and keeping high as a standard. So what do you use to sanitize my shears while I'm in the garden? I have a little Target shower caddy. Yes, that is like out of the like college dorm department or whatever, shower caddy, because it lets water through and stuff. Then I just have a couple of mason jars, and yes, they look a little bit used, but they are often in use. And then just plain old Clorox bleach solution. And then on the other side, Dawn. I know, don't come at me for the bleach solution, because some people rather use alcohol. That's a little bit easier on the equipment, but I prefer the bleach solution because it's very, very effective. I know it runs down the material more on your clippers and on your shears, but I find it more effective, and I'll try to keep up with the cleaning of my clippers like every few weeks, that they don't get too grumpy at me, but it's a price I'm willing to pay for healthy plants. So let me show you what I do for my indeterminate tomato pruning. Here are my cherry tomatoes, and you can tell they are doing fantastic. They're actually kind of wild and bonkers already. I can't believe how tall they are already. They are definitely loving the weather. I hope they will love the weather next week as well, because we're getting temperatures into the 90s, and they're not so happy with 90 plus temperatures typically, but I'll hope they have established themselves strong enough to hold that tight. So for my cherry tomatoes here, which are growing over my arch, I let them roam a little bit more than, for example, my heirloom tomatoes, which I'm growing up a string, which need to be a little bit more tidy to really successfully grow up the string. In my case here, I just look and try to distribute the plant alongside the trellis well enough, and try to cut off just the lower bottom leaves to give them some airflow on the bottom. Every week I typically cut off 1 or 2 leaves from the bottom so it can focus on the top growth up. And that is also where it takes most of the energy. So in the end, I will have, for most cases, a lot of fruit clusters, but then just the stem and no bottom leaves. And that is typically how I do it for all my indeterminate tomatoes. Not the paste tomatoes, they I leave untouched in most cases. But for my cherry tomatoes and my heirloom tomatoes in the other bed, that is exactly what I do to give them airflow, space, and basically energy to focus on what's important, and that is growing bigger and growing more fruits. If a few suckers are going too wild, I cut off 1 or 2 every once in a while to just, again, airflow and keeping the plant tidy and from invading the paste tomato space. If you leave cherry tomatoes to their own devices, they are pretty unruly. Don't forget to dip. 1, 2. So much better. So you can see actually through the chicken wire again and see some plant stems and not just leaves. That is typically how I prefer it. So, and I actually figured and saw that all of them are already carrying fruit, so that's great. So the other thing I prioritize is staking this year, because it's my number 2 goal on my list, because I failed so miserably last year and it annoyed me so much through the year that I vowed to be better this year. So the 2 things I always look for when it comes to staking is staking my tomatoes with the tomato clips, and then also have proper netting and support for my cut flower bed. So that's actually what we're going to lift up. You can tell the zinnias and the cosmos over there. Let's actually go around. You can tell the zinnias and the cosmos over there, and everything in the stretch on the back needs staking already. So we will lift it up to the 18 inches, which I typically have it, and then let it grow. And for the tomatoes, we'll put some tomato clips in, which we can do quickly now. This just helps them to secure it a little bit and keep the structure going. So for the staking, and please don't mind my tomato fingers, and for the tomato clips, important is when you bend those clips that you put the string or the netting right here in the center of the clip. That's really important. Then the clip is not going away anywhere, so that will fit perfectly. So for example here, I want to get that one a little bit closer here back to the way where it's supposed to grow. So I put the string in the middle, then attach it here so it's not like intruding the space over there. And then another one here, which this one I want to clip in here. So bending it, putting this in the middle, and then this around so you can hear it clip, and then it's secure. All right, let's do the netting, and I hope I can do it with the fencing around. We'll see. It should work this way. So I'm just lifting up the netting step by step along the way. Great, so we're done with the lifting the netting. And yeah, that was a little bit more tricky because for some reason in the corner the netting was like pushed into the ground. I'm not exactly sure why. So don't look at my hands again. They're dirty and need a good wash, but all plants are now like looking up to the sky and look like they're well supported with the netting I have, so that it should be all good. And that was pretty much what I'm doing until probably 2 months from now or 3 months from now, when they're all really tall and bushy. Then they get one more support layer with twine around the posts. One thing which I can also recommend is to separate your garden into zones for maintenance. That, number one, helps that you touch every zone in a certain frequency, but also it helps to break it down. It doesn't make it so overwhelming, and everything we saw in here today didn't take me longer than 30 minutes. Well, it did take me longer because I recorded a video, but otherwise it would have not taken me longer than 30 minutes. So try to reduce your list down into bite-sized pieces to set you up for success and not for immediate failure. That would be my recommendation. So I hope this video was helpful for you. As I always promise you to show you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and sometimes the slightly boring tasks. But I still hope that was helpful and you enjoyed that. Otherwise, let me know what you're up to, and if you have any questions. Otherwise, subscribe and watch another video. Thank you.